In this video, we will cover the process of printing the year-end payroll reports. Before printing these reports, you must close the year, which is covered in a separate video. Either at that time, when you close the year, or at a later date, you will need to print any year-end payroll reports and W-2s. Printing of the W-2s is also covered in a separate video. So to proceed, let's go to the Payroll menu, Payroll Tax Reports Control Center. We will again enter the year that we just closed and the quarter, and then we will move to the Year-End Closing tab. And you'll notice that we have everything in balance: the year-to-date wage report, payroll journal, and archive totals. There are two year-end reports that may need to be printed. The first one is the Federal Form 931. Remember that in this set of files, we have both regular employees and agricultural employees. In our quarterly reporting, we reported all of our regular employees to the IRS using Federal Form 941. Now we use Form 943 for agricultural employees. This is printed just once a year, and it covers the entire year instead of having to file a quarterly report. This will report any income taxes and Social Security taxes that are due. So we click on the Federal 943 button. The year is entered already for us. We click on Calculate Totals, and we have the total due calculated, which includes any withholding tax, employee and employer Social Security, and Medicare. And our balance due is $30,033. Next, we want to enter the amount of any deposits that we have made. And there is a button here to list payments. When we click on this button, we're going to get a list of checks that were issued to the Internal Revenue Service. Just as we did previously when looking at these checks, we need to change our ending date because the last payment for this year was actually made in January. So we're going to change our month to January and the ending date to the 15th to see if we can compile all of these checks. And you'll notice all of these checks are listed here. Now remember, you may write checks to the Internal Revenue Service for more than one form, but because these checks were issued by our payroll tax deposit screen, it has put 943 in the description. So we are looking at only the 943 checks. The total of the payments is $30,033.04. So we're going to enter that on line 10. And you'll notice that we have an overpayment of 4 cents. So if we'd like to get rid of that overpayment so that the balance comes out to zero, we can enter a 4-cent adjustment for rounding on line 8. And so our balance due is now 0. On the right side of the screen, the tax liability for each month of the year is listed. If these numbers do not appear, you can click on the Update Tax Liability button to automatically compile this information. You will notice that because of rounding, our tax liability for the year is actually $30,033.09, which is 5 cents higher than what our calculation plus adjustment is. We want this to balance with the total deposits for the year. And so the easiest way to adjust this is to simply click on the Adjust Tax Liability button, and the program will automatically adjust our liability to what was actually due. So now our tax liability for the year is $30,033.04. We also need to enter the state in which deposits were made, and then we need to indicate whether we are a semi-weekly or monthly depositor. We'll take the monthly option first and see how that prints on the 943. If you have a third-party designee, you can enter that information, and you can also enter the information for the signature line. We can now preview the Form 943 report, and you'll see where everything is listed by quarter. If you are a semi-weekly depositor, click on Preview, and you will see that no monthly totals are listed here. Instead, you will need to also print Form 943A, which will be a schedule of your tax liability by month. So we have March, April, May, June, and then on the second page, the tax liability for the last 6 months of the year. The next report that we will need to print is the Federal Unemployment Tax Report, Form 940. We click on the FUTA 940 box, and the screen appears with our year already entered, and we simply click on Calculate Totals, and the form is filled in with the wage and tax information. If there are any payments exempt from FUTA tax, that's line 4, then we need to check the appropriate box or boxes to indicate the type of payments that were exempt. In this case, it is a pension plan, so we check that. It also will subtract out payments of more than $7,000 per employee and give us our net taxable wages. The taxes due on line 8 are based on the FUI rate of 0.6%, which is entered as 0.006 in the federal tax rate file. However, this is a California employer. So in addition to the 0.6% that's due, California is a credit reduction state. So line 11 calculates the credit reduction tax due, which is another 0.6%. This rate, if applicable, is entered in the state tax rate file for California and hence is calculated on the form. So the total tax due, including the credit reduction, is calculated on line 12. There is a button to list payments. This will list the payments that have been made to the vendor account specified in the federal tax rate file. Again, if you have been using the tax deposit screen in DataTech software, each one of the payments made for FUI taxes will be identified by Form 940 in the description. So we will have a list of those payments. Just to make sure we're not missing a payment, let's again change our ending date to January 15th and see if any additional payments were made. No payments were made, so up to this point we have total payments due of $392.55. So if we enter that amount here in our tax deposited for the quarter, we have a balance due of $402.21. If the total liability for the year does not equal the amount due, you can use the Adjust Tax Liability button in order to adjust the tax liability. In many cases, you will need to do this if the credit reduction tax has not been included in your accrual. And this will add the amount you owe for the credit reduction into the liability for the fourth quarter per IRS regulations. You can now complete Part 6 and 7 and then print the report. This warning message will come up just to remind you that there could be a credit reduction charge, but we've already taken care of that. So we have the 940 form printed. This can be then printed and signed and sent in with a payment. Because the amount due is less than $500, you can go ahead and pay that with the form, and the program will create a 940 payment voucher for you to send the payment. The last page of the report is the Schedule A, Form 940, which must accompany the Form 940. And this details any additional taxes that are due to the credit reduction tax. For employers that may have large amounts due for the credit reduction tax, the payroll program can be configured to automatically accrue the amounts due, and you can then include them in your tax deposits. See the on-screen help for more information on credit reduction options. The last two steps in the year-end reporting are W-2 printing and, if you are an electronic filer, generating the electronic W-2 file. These topics will be discussed in a separate video.